So welcome everyone. I'm proud to introduce Kerry Earl. Kerry works with me at the University of Waikato, Hamilton, New Zealand, and she's going to present a small case study for us today on student perceptions of 4 short text assignment formats. So please join me in welcoming Kerry. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you. Thanks, Teresa, and my apologies, everybody. I did try the headset earlier and thought that I wasn't having much success, so I changed and then changed back, and that caused some issues. Thank you for your patience. Let's get started. Do we have more assignment options for fully online courses? And she says, I'm looking for my buttons. There we go. What I'd like to do is just remind people, I don't need to remind people that are involved in tertiary teaching or any kind of higher education teaching, but the climate that we are working in is our workload's getting heavier, the student populations are getting more diverse, the aspects of our jobs are getting more diverse. There's a strong emphasis on effective use of any funding, of finding our own funding. There are fewer academics, jobs are not being replaced, class sizes are increasing. And of course, when you're involved in blended learning, there can be a double up of different kinds of aspects to your job. So assessment has become an area that people have drawn attention to in online environments as the opportunity, through use of the technology, to make some efficiencies, to really try and work smarter. The kinds of things that we have through Moodle quizzes, grades books, using Turnitin to help us with plagiarism. Lots of things looking at automated marking systems, those kinds of things. In my talk today, I really want to remind people that assessment serves purposes that beyond just the grading, beyond just the qualification, and that's where part of the hassle lies. It serves needs for the organisation, for the institution, for the assessor, for the teacher, and for the student. And for the student, it's about the grade, but also about the learning, and that can cause us problems. So the idea of assessments, I think, and I agree with Chris here, is that the idea is to encourage learning, to provide feedback on learning for the student and the lecturer, and to document competencies or skills that we're trying to find out whether the student has developed. In that Earl reference at the end there, that is Lorna Earl, who writes about assessment for learning. She talks about how assessment aligns what is taught and what is important to be learned, but that the information needs to be used by both students and lecturers guiding the process, although she's talking about students in compulsory education settings. I want to highlight the idea of this stimulating further learning. I think if we can stimulate further learning, we can get more bang for our buck as far as learning available in the contact hours that we've got. So behind this is the idea that assessment is experienced by students and also by lecturers. And the interaction between teacher and student includes and is often focused around assessment. The assessment makes a significant part of teacher-student interaction. You think of the teacher instructions, whether in the paper outline or in the class, discussion forums about what's required in the assignments. You think about the questioning, for clarification, the expansion of ideas or any other resources or anything like that that goes on prior to the assignment being constructed when the student is working on it or developing their assignment response. There's also issues in communication around extensions required, and excuses was the word that immediately came to mind, but that kind of interaction between the teacher and the student can be quite significant, and it all significant to the experience of the student of the paper, of their experience in that paper. And it can centre a lot around assessment and, of course, the importance of feedback to student learning. That's something that I'd like to get. Feedback is not the focus here, but it's something I'd be keen to turn my attention to in the future. So within an environment of this increased lecturer workload, and thinking about the impact that assessment has on student experience of the paper through their teacher-student interaction, then we come to a point where we're asking ourselves if resorting to auto-marking or more technological software help in our assessment processes, whether that is going to be the most beneficial option. Of course, it's always an option. Academic processes, in my view, cannot be separated from the social or relational aspects of online learning, and the student experience of assessment cannot be separated from his or her learning experience. And to make this point even clearer, I suppose I've drawn on some references in other education sectors that highlight students' experience. They value the sense of belonging. It's about being seen, about being recognised. And Board & Associates from Sydney say that one of the most significant influences on student experience of higher education is their assessment experience and what they get out of it. In my experience as an online lecturer, I dropped traditional assignments such as essays quite early on in the courses that I teach, where I have control as the coordinator and am the main teacher. Of course, in team teaching and compulsory papers, there's still a lot of traditional assignment work goes on in our online papers. But I find those essay types hard work to mark online, and they don't make a lot of sense to me if we're learning online, discussing, interacting between teachers and students online, and yet for our assessment we're still resorting to traditional formats. I've also come to realise across teaching in a number of sectors is the power of preparing something for an identified audience. Now, apparently that is about attention, the simple human need for recognition and appreciation of something that we do. And I do feel that when work is prepared for a marker audience only, there can be some problems. It can be a not very exciting audience for a student to prepare a piece of work for. Also, I feel that when the marker or the lecturer is the person that's marking it, the marker is the person that's been teaching them, the students can include a lot of things that they assume that you already know. They write in a way that indicates that the reader is supposed to already know something, and they may not explain things as well as they could because they're thinking, oh, well, they're teaching you something or telling you back something that you've already told them. So this idea of mixing up the assignments, I think, has come from this idea of focusing on the learning outcome and wanting to enhance students' opportunities to learn things through the assignments, given that our hours are cut, everybody's distracted, you know, there's a lot of other things going on in our students' lives, and you have to make every opportunity count. I think there's potential in looking at all the technological affordances that we can use to make things not only more engaging, but also help with publication and presentation. Still fitting with the assessment purpose, and of course the need for the student to show us what they know and can do. So I didn't come up with really, I've been involved with other people using these short test assignment formats. Nola Campbell, who I worked with when I first came to the university as a lecturer in online courses, she was already working with a variety of what we called short text assignment formats, and it's something that I've picked up from her and carried on, and now started to more deliberately share these ideas with other people through audiences such as yourselves. So I want to talk about some of these, what I have called short text formats assignment examples, to give you a better idea, and because we've got plenty of time. So the kinds of things I was thinking about, or have used, are text formats such as abstracts. And an abstract that I've put there, it's just 150 words. The format, I've used a Barbara Kemmler format for abstracts. When I went to a Barbara Kemmler writing seminar, she gave us quite a clear outline of what an abstract should have as a text, and using those instructions to give students the opportunity to summarize information, perhaps a long meta-analysis or something, or some other piece of work that is available online that doesn't have an abstract, because it's not that kind of research academic article. It may be something that's been produced and available online, current, up to date, but not necessarily written in that formal scholarly way. So it's missing abstracts, and that's very powerful, because the students all get excited that they only have to write 150 words, and then they all tell me that it's harder than it looks. I've used poems. It's best if you give a clear idea to students about the subject or the length of expectation, but also if there's a great variety possible, because they can be tricky to mark, poems, but of course, as far as the criteria goes. But the marking experience itself is quite a pleasure. Now, the pamphlets tend to be published or ready to publish as a double-sided A4, so it could have two folds in it and be folded over, or it could have one fold in an A4 page and folded over it, but it's both sides. And a pamphlet is for the kinds of target audiences, maybe to help students in school, maybe as an information to parents, maybe on something for the students in the next class. So it identifies what the students think is important, and it puts it in a way that's digestible and identifies the key information. Posters, of course, we're all familiar with. Magazine articles, again, it's 2 pages, about 800 words. A magazine article is the maximum size that I use, and magazine articles are that item. Two sides. I like the students to put themselves in the character of an expert, and they're writing a magazine article to inform their audience about something in particular, whatever the assignment content is supposed to be about. Job descriptions, we've used that, and I teach courses about e-education and ICT in schools, and that often involves new roles for people. So we might identify a job description for an e-learning expert in a school, for example, and they identify what skills that person might need, characteristics, what their job description, tasks might be, who they might report to, and those kinds of things. Essentially not a long document in tables and bullet points and things like that. Most of these would also have reference lists as the supplementary item. That's part of the assignment. Summaries and discussion starters. The SME stands for subject matter experts. I always find that you get very good understanding about what it's like to teach and learn in an online course if you have the opportunity to be a subject matter expert, and the topics would be divided. The students would elect their topic, they would have their week or their group to discuss something, and they would have to come up with some kind of a starter background document of 1 page and a discussion starter question and a reference list, and that would be marked. And then, of course, they would be the facilitator for that discussion. Presentation to an audience. It used to be PowerPoints. It still can be PowerPoints, but there's a lot of varieties of ways the students might address this, and if possible, I like to give choice. In these presentations to an audience, when I have classes that have, say, early childhood teachers, primary teachers, librarians, secondary teachers, people that are in training positions in commercial enterprises, they might all be doing a presentation to an audience, but they identify different audiences. And if it's something like cyber safety or some other relevant topic that's across the board, then they can all present to their audience, and they all have to identify what's important. One of the key things I've found is that it can be distracting if somebody's presentation is fabulous. And the way I work it is that it's not necessarily the presentation that is marked, depending on what it is. It will be elements of the content that get marked rather than the presentation. Although if you're going to do PowerPoints or presentations that are available online or anything like that, then the presentation aspect can be part of the assignment grading. It's just important to think about, was that what was taught? Does the criteria for the presentation match up with the learning that the student was expected to do, or is it an extra? Workshop introduction and activity is a bit like a presentation to an audience. I ask them to construct the lesson plan, if you like, for a workshop, and they present the introduction, and it's usually about 50 minutes, so they have to present this lesson plan of what they're going to do, and I add and activity, otherwise you can get lectures for 50 minutes if you're not careful. Online quizzes, the students, I'll get a very good question, I'll get to that question. Online quizzes, I actually ask the students to use and create a quiz. The kinds of things in my e-education papers might be a 10-question quiz for preparing students for readiness for being an online learner, and my students, as part of the assignment, need to identify the 10 most things that the literature and their experience leads them to think that they are the most important things as far as being ready for learning online, and they design them into a quiz, and they need to provide sort of model answers and feedback boxes, depending on what people have, depending on what the student response, the response to the quiz might be, not my student response. And I'll just say a thing about the animation with a script, which ties in with Lynn's question. The animation with a script, the conversation about a myth is the topic. teaching about e-education. There's quite a few myths about e-education. I'll select a limited few, perhaps 4, for the students to choose from. Things like you don't have to participate or in discussions. Or you have loads of free time, or it's very lonely because you don't have a class to work with, some of those kinds of things. And the students would choose, make up an animation. They have to submit, it's only 3 minutes. They have to make up a 3-minute animation using software program. They also submit the script. That's in case I have any issues. So there'll be the introduction, why they chose that myth, the characters that are in their animation, the setting for their animation, a bit like a play. Then they'll have the script that their characters say, so that if anything goes wrong, I can check it out. And then they'll have the link. And the first year I did this, we all used the same software, and then that software became proprietary, rather than open, and you had to pay for it. So the next 2 years I've done it with the students picking their own software. Now that caused us to investigate a wider variety of options, but they also asked a lot of questions about that, about which one to use, but they generally answered those within themselves. The first time I put animation with a script, I thought I'll answer the questions as we go to see what they need, but they just answered each other's questions, and they were, how do I print out a script? So actually I was very surprised that in the first place that my students did have the necessary ICT skills, or they were using friends, relatives and teenage children perhaps, or 10-year-olds in their families for the presentation part. And I'm quite happy, yes, with easier presentation methods if they do have feel less confident with their skills. Give it a go. Again, it depends on identifying your criteria to get at the learning that you're looking for. What did they pick? That is a good question. Off the top of my mind, I should know those kinds of things. We did find that there were, yes, I'm sorry, I would have to, Minamoto. Oh, I'll write that down because that would be useful for this year, of course, when we try it again. I don't remember them finding that one. Thank you. So the research I'm reporting on is from one version of this course, and these are the assignments specifically for that course. So the course was fully online, a 3rd year, a 300 level course, an optional course. It was split into 4 modules, a 12-week course split into 4 modules, and each module had 2 discussion forums. And these are the 4 assignment types. A self-evaluation assignment, where they were asked to reflect and evaluate themselves for their participation in discussion. And they had some guidelines for that, and they'd already had 1 round of feedback from me that wasn't graded. It was just some feedback on their earlier, on their first discussion to reflect out, to tell them a bit about how they're going and set some expectations. And so they were to reflect on that. That was the first assignment. The second assignment is a magazine article, as I said, 800 words, the best websites for. Now, this is a simple assignment, really. It depends what they are interested in and what's appropriate for their level and their audience. But they were to identify an audience, and then they were to develop an article that's the best websites for. It can be the best websites for early maths with preschool children, or it could be the best websites for teaching business studies in secondary environment, or it could be the best websites for whatever their subject is. One year I had a woman who was, I think, a librarian who did a best websites for genealogy research. Because it's all submitted online and it has all the links available, it's relatively easy for me if I come across something that I'm completely unfamiliar with, like the genealogy research, to go and go and check on things, which does take a little bit longer. But I do find my primary and secondary teacher education, initial teacher education students do a lot of the similar things, and particularly literacy and numeracy or science things. But we also have art, best websites for photographs about New Zealand, for example. The report on trend assignment is 800 words as well. It is a report. The trend, of course, is from the Horizon reports. So they're to look, the task changes each year just because the Horizon reports change. So that the task is to look at the last 3 years of Horizon reports and prepare a mini report about that, about the trends that they're predicted and their implications for their workplace. So it might be primary schools, or it might be accounting firms, or whatever is the most relevant for them, early childhood settings. It's structured, it's written like a report, it has contents pages, it's tables and graphs, and all those things are all allowed. And a conversation assignment about the e-education myth. I think I've talked about that one a bit. They were surveyed using SurveyMonkey at the end of the course after all the assignment work was completed. And really all they were asked to do was rank out of 5 whether they liked the assignment, whether they learned from the assignment, and whether they found it useful. And of course, then they were asked to comment about why they gave that ranking. And then a second section listed each of the 4 assignments and asked them to identify the pluses and the minuses or issues for each of the assignments, looking at their experience. One of the things of this, of course, is that it wasn't as they go. So they'd most recently finished and received feedback and grading for the last assignment, because it was within 2 weeks of them getting their appraisal and their grades back again. It was part of the appraisal of the paper. So these are some of the things that they said. The best websites assignment was quite positive. Essentially because they, some of them had a play with something that they hadn't done before, publishing software. They produced something that they were going to use. So they might have best websites for teaching financial literacy in secondary school, and they would be going to take that away. Or they might be preparing best websites for student homework in financial literacy that they were going to hand out or pass on to make available to their students in some way. So the production of the assignment was received positives, and the product of the assignment received positives. The other thing was about the best websites assignment was that after it was all complete and they'd received feedback, the students were given the option of loading them and sharing them with each other. They could fiddle with it and change it. They could, take account of the feedback that I'd given them, or they could just present a clean copy. And I think that was part of the reason why that assignment was liked. So the different assignments liked, learned from, and useful. What I thought they might identify, I suppose, usefulness, relevance might be high on the list, but actually what was very high on the list was variety of options. And of course these assignments were different from the options, the assignment options they had in other papers, which were more essay based or other kinds of more traditional formats. And the creativity that gave them, because they had to choose fonts or layouts or graphics, and they had to identify what content was significant. And so they did recognise that that this was challenging, but that it was worth the effort, I think, was the general response. The little numbers on the sides are just coding from students' feedback. It was all anonymous, but I gave the response as a code for use in future publications. So this is a comment, particularly extra normal. That was one that they were using. There you go, extra normal movie making. That was the script one, and I think this highlights the relevance, the ideas for assignments. Most of my students are initial teacher education or in-service teachers, so the assignment ideas that they used were then transferred. They thought, oh, I could get my students to do, for example, an animation or a best website task or something like that. So I suppose I want to get back to why I would advocate these kinds of things. Just to say the best website task and the animated movie making received the highest ratings. The self-evaluation of discussion participation received the least favourable. However, the students identified that it was useful because they got it was a time to pause and reflect and think about how they were participating and perhaps take some ideas about where they were going to next. So although they didn't really like it, they were useful. It was a useful exercise. And I think, is that because we think we're always bad at evaluating selves? It's really interesting. I don't know if you've done this with your students, but the self-evaluation exercise, the ones that received the least grades were the ones that said online students need to do this and this and this according to this person, that person, and the other person. And the ones that got the higher grades were, I realized that as so-and-so said, I was doing that too, or this illustrates how I felt when somebody did this or didn't do that in our paper. So it was one of those assignments where the people that may not be very necessarily the high flyers, but were much more honest and reflective, actually got better grades. And the people that were very academic in their approach and used to getting high grades didn't do so well because there was a lot of sort of preaching to online students in their responses, and there wasn't an I. For some, it was a case of there wasn't even an I in the document, in their response, which was 500 words. There wasn't even an I, like I did or I have or anything in the evaluation. I think that's another thing about the assignments. It gives a greater opportunity, a variety gives a greater opportunity for our students to show us what they know and can do. And not everybody is that academic essay writer, but they may have a sound understanding of what we're trying to get across. And if we give them choices about how to do that, and we give them a variety across the paper, So a report format, an animated script format, a magazine article format. I think we're giving a fairer chance for students to show us what they can do. So to go back to some literature, 10 criteria to guide assessment design, authenticity of the nature of the task. I think having a properly identified audience, and I didn't tell them who their audience was, but that's part of what they were required to do, was identify up front who their audience was. Communication, the articles, apart from the self-evaluation, they were designed to speak, to communicate something to somebody, and they had to decide what was important about the content to communicate. There was a degree of student choice, not much student choice, a maximum of perhaps 4 things to choose from. Of course, they could use their software and explore, but most people explored 2 or 3 and then picked one pretty readily. I do find that if I have international students in the class, the more choice you give them, the longer it takes them to get started, because they really don't know what is the right choice, and coming to that decision can be quite debilitating for some students, whereas other students pick up and run with it. Again, it's important that criteria is clear. The appropriate and discriminatory use of online resources, and an examination of present viewpoints. So a lot of them asked them, a lot of it was about, say, the myth was, what did they think at the moment? Perhaps they were one of the characters and they were talking to somebody else. They had to present something that was largely constituted by a viewpoint backed up by literature that they had been reading or been exposed to, or that they had come across themselves. Interact with real-world tools. Essentially, that was the software and hardware that they were being asked to use. And I think this is really key. If we can get students to learn something from the process of the assignment and be engaged in the development of the assignment, as well as just the, as well as the response, as well as the outcome, I think we're onto a winner for maximising the opportunities for learning through assignments in our papers. Why I decided to do this formal research was because the students were giving me feedback that said that they spent a lot more time on these assignments than they did on other assignments that they had in their program. And that was because they got wrapped up in it, caught up in it and wrapped up in it, and really essentially did it for themselves, not for the marker. In fact, when I first started teaching in these papers, I sometimes had more assignments, because if you have a poem, I felt that doesn't, how much credit do you give to a poem? But the students were spending so much time and effort on these things, I had to raise what things were worth to give a better balance for the effort that they were putting in. I mean, some of the publishable items like magazine articles or pamphlets have actually been used. One of the teachers that was in the course one year was working through the Polytech, local Polytech. She designed a pamphlet for students that came to her for help in one particular aspect of their course, and that was published by Wintech as part of her coursework, made available to the students. I guess what that slide was to show was that there are other people that say these kinds of things, and my assignments are really just illustrating them with these points with particular examples. So I wanted to highlight that assessment is more than a summative check on students' knowledge. It's an experience, it's part of the communication, and therefore the relationship between the teacher and student. And we know that communication between teacher and students is really important for its impact on students' perceptions of their experience of the paper. And that has implications for retention and completion of our students, which we are increasingly accountable for. And also remembering that, students experience their learning as a social as well as an academic exercise. So when we go back to our need to work smarter, not harder, and we consider the technical digital affordances that we can use to help manage assignment workload for lecturers, perhaps we need to make sure that we're not lessening aspects of the experience that are valued by students. So you can pursue efficiencies. The students load their work, it's automatically marked, they get feedback from a feedback bank or something. I have no evidence to suggest that it does, but my worry is that from everything we know about students' experience of their study and the importance of connection in their courses, that we may end up tripping ourselves up by the students feel disconnected from the paper through not having a face to the person or how their work is being marked and graded. And we end up separating assignments from the learning, which really doesn't make any sense at all. You can't separate the teaching from the and learning from the assessment. I believe we have more choice. I've tried to illustrate that with some of my examples. So really I'm just saying, in the end, time for pause, time for investigating and reconsidering possibilities. Perhaps there's some short text assignment formats that could meet the assessment purposes in your online course that uses the opportunity for variety, that uses the opportunity for students to input more creatively in their work, that uses the software and hardware options that we have available, and lets them run with the ball a little bit, I suppose. You can also understand that marking these assignments, especially the animations, 3 minutes, listening to an animation 3 minutes long, some of them are really quite hilarious, and you laugh and then you look through for the content. But they really do a good job, and it's so rewarding to see, and it's relatively short in time. These classes aren't big, up to 24, 25. I think we've had 36, 40, 44. So I'm not talking about big classes. But the variety for the marker is also enjoyable. Being able to do everything on screen, see the text in relatively, user-friendly way on screen, keeps my motivation up in my marking. Having clear criteria based on the content helps us all focus on what we're supposed to be picking up or gaining understandings from the course. And I find it really enjoyable, and the students seem to give really good feedback. They seem to be able to identify when they really like an assignment, but they don't learn as much from it. I've had that feedback as well in this survey, that they really liked it, but they didn't learn as much from it as perhaps they learnt from another exercise that they have done in their assignments. Thank you, Stuart. So they are able to discern what they like and what they learn from, and I think we've got to give them credit for that. All right. Well, I think I've probably talked on long enough. If there is any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Kerry. I know that Stuart had to dash, and I know that it's very odd hours of the morning and night in other parts of the world. So if there's any questions, folks, just pop them in the chat area there, or feel free to unmute your microphone and let us hear your voice. There is also a discussion forum in Kerry's iMoot course, so if you think of any questions after the session, you can feel free to pop them in that discussion forum, and we'll pick them up there. And also let your colleagues know that that have registered for iMoot, that the recordings are available as well. So if they're still asleep, then they can watch it too. Thanks again, Kerry.
Thank you, Teresa.